I've always been fascinated by the world of paranormal files, a realm where the unknown and the unexplained reside. For years, I've spent countless hours researching and preparing myself for what's to come. My fascination with this dark corner of human experience began when I was just a teenager, poring over dusty old books in my local library's occult section. The stories within those yellowed pages captivated me, tales of demonic possessions, cursed artifacts, and ancient rituals that promised power but delivered only terror. As I delved deeper into the world of paranormal files, I began to realize that this was more than just a collection of scary stories. It was a gateway to understanding the very fabric of our reality. The boundaries between the worlds of the living and the dead began to blur, and I knew I had to explore further. I spent years honing my skills, learning about various forms of magic, including solomonic rituals, which promised to unlock the secrets of the universe, but at a terrible cost. My apartment is now filled with dusty tomes, ancient artifacts, and strange devices that seem to hum with an otherworldly energy. I've surrounded myself with a network of like-minded individuals who share my passion for the paranormal. We exchange stories, theories, and warnings, each one more chilling than the last. And so, I've decided to invest in a high-quality digital audio recorder, hoping to capture some of the strange occurrences that have been plaguing me lately. Tonight, I'll be recording myself as I recount some of my most disturbing experiences. The lights are about to go out, and I'll be guiding you through this journey into the heart of paranormal terror. Be warned, what you're about to hear is not for the faint of heart. I started when I received a mysterious package containing an ancient tome bound in black leather. The wrapping was plain, no indication of who might have sent it or what lay within. It was as if the package had materialized out of thin air, appearing on my doorstep one evening while I was home alone. At first, I thought it might be some kind of prank, but there was something unsettling about the whole thing. The package itself felt heavy, almost weighty, and the black leather binding seemed to absorb the light around it, giving off a faint aura of malevolence. I tried to brush it off as mere paranoia, but my curiosity got the better of me. I carefully opened the package, feeling a shiver run down my spine as I pulled back the wrapping. The book itself was old, its pages yellowed with age and crackling with dryness. The title, De Mort et Ténébris, was embossed in gold lettering on the cover, seeming to glow in the dim light of my apartment. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should even open it, but something compelled me to do so. As I lifted the first page, a faint whisper seemed to caress my ear, sending a chill down my spine. The words within were written in an ancient language I didn't recognize, but somehow I knew exactly what they meant. It was as if the book had been waiting for me all along, its secrets and horrors tailored specifically to my own twisted fascination. MYSERCHLEDMETOALOCYALOCYULTSHOPWHEREIMEDTWITHEPROPER WHOCLIMEDTOAHVDKNOWLEDGEOPINTOUTHERLMS. I had heard whispers of such places, hidden corners of the city where the veil between worlds was thin. My search led me to a small, unassuming shop tucked away in a forgotten alley. The sign above the door read Erebus, and the windows were shrouded in a perpetual gloom. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should turn back, but something drew me inside. The air was thick with incense and the smell of old books. Shelves upon shelves of dusty tomes stretched towards the ceiling, casting long shadows across the floor. Behind the counter stood an elderly man with sunken eyes and skin as pale as alabaster. He introduced himself as Malister, the proprietor of Erebus. His voice was low and gravelly, like the rustling of dry leaves. I asked him about the book that had arrived at my doorstep, and his expression changed, like a shadow deepening in the corners of his eyes. "Ah, yes," he said, "I see you have acquired something. Interesting." He leaned forward, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. "That book is a key, one that unlocks doors to realms beyond our own. Are you prepared to pay the price for such knowledge?" I felt a shiver run down my spine as I met his gaze. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes, something ancient and malevolent. Then it was gone. But I knew then that I had stumbled into something much larger than myself. I stumbled upon a ritual that promised power beyond my wildest dreams, but came with an unbearable cost. Malister led me to a hidden chamber deep within Erebus, the air thick with anticipation. The room was dimly lit by candles that seemed to burn with an otherworldly flame. At the center of the room, a large pentagram was drawn on the floor, its points reaching towards the darkness like skeletal fingers. Malister began to chant in a language I didn't understand, his voice weaving a spell of darkness and fear. The words seemed to sear themselves into my mind, leaving behind a trail of unease. As he spoke, the shadows around us began to writhe and twist like living things. I felt a presence building, a power that threatened to consume me whole. Malister stopped chanting, his eyes gleaming with an unholy light. "This is the ritual of the Shadow Weaver," he said, his voice dripping with malevolence. "With this power, you will be able to tap into the very fabric of reality." I felt a surge of excitement mixed with trepidation as Malister handed me a small, ornate box. Inside, a dark crystal pulsed with an energy that seemed to resonate deep within my soul. "This is your key," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Use it wisely, for once you do, there is no turning back." I took the box, feeling its weight settle into my palm like a promise of destruction. As I looked up at Malister, I saw something in his eyes that chilled me to the bone, a knowledge that he had no idea what he was unleashing upon me. And yet, I knew I couldn't resist the power that lay within the box. I opened it, and a dark energy surged forth, like a tidal wave crashing against the shore of my sanity. As I began the ritual, I felt an unseemly presence watching me from the shadows. At first, it was just a nagging sense of being observed, but as the moments ticked by, the feeling grew stronger. It was as if something was drawing closer, its presence making my skin crawl. I tried to focus on the ritual, but my eyes kept drifting towards the darkness, searching for some sign of what was lurking just out of sight. The air seemed to thicken, taking on a heavy, oppressive quality that made it hard to breathe. I could feel the weight of the entity's gaze upon me, like a physical force pressing down upon my shoulders. My heart beat faster, my palms growing sweaty as I struggled to maintain my composure. And then, suddenly, the candles on the altar flared to life, casting flickering shadows across the walls. The pentagram on the floor seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, like a heartbeat waiting to be unleashed. In that moment, I felt the entity's presence coalesce into a tangible form. It was tall and imposing, its features twisted beyond recognition. Eyes glowed like embers in the dark, boring into my very soul. My voice caught in my throat as I tried to speak, but no words would come. The entity didn't move or speak. It simply watched me with an unblinking gaze that seemed to bore into my very essence. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the presence vanished. The candles died, plunging the room into darkness. I was left standing alone, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. I knew then that I had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The entity had claimed me as its own, and I was now bound to it by threads of dark magic. I could feel its power coursing through my veins, tempting me with promises of forbidden knowledge and unspeakable power. But at what cost? The entity spoke to me in a voice that sent shivers down my spine, and I knew I had made a terrible mistake. "You have called upon the Shadow Weaver, mortal," it said, its words dripping with malevolence. "Now you must face the consequences of your actions." I felt a wave of fear wash over me as I realized the true nature of the entity's power. It was not a being to be trifled with, but a force of darkness that could consume my very soul. The entity continued to speak, its voice weaving a spell of dread and foreboding. "You have summoned me from the depths of the unknown, mortal. Now you must pay the price for your arrogance." I tried to speak, to beg for mercy or forgiveness, but my voice was frozen in my throat. The entity's gaze seemed to burn into my very essence, extracting every last shred of hope and sanity from my being. And then, in an instant, everything went black. When I came to, I found myself back in the ritual chamber, the candles still burning, the pentagram on the floor pulsing with an otherworldly energy. But something was different. The air felt heavier, the shadows cast by the candles twisting and writhing like living things. I knew then that I had been changed forever, that I had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The entity's power coursed through my veins, tempting me with promises of forbidden knowledge and unspeakable power. But at what cost? I knew that I would never be the same again, that I had made a terrible mistake by daring to call upon the Shadow Weaver. I acquired a cursed object that seemed to radiate an otherworldly energy, but at what cost? The small, ornate box had been nestled in the folds of Malister's cloak, its surface etched with strange symbols that seemed to shimmer and writhe like living things. I had felt an inexplicable pull towards it, as if it was calling to me from across the void. Without thinking, I reached out and took it, feeling a sudden jolt of energy course through my veins. The box itself was cool to the touch, its surface seeming to absorb and nullify any warmth or light that might be present. As I lifted the lid, a puff of noxious gas escaped, carrying with it the scent of decay and corruption. Inside, the dark crystal pulsed with an energy that seemed to resonate deep within my soul. It was as if the crystal was alive, its power calling out to me like a siren's song. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I reached for the crystal, my fingers closing around it like a vice. The moment I made contact with it, I knew that I had made a terrible mistake. The energy emanating from the crystal was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. It was as if it was pulling me apart and putting me back together again, molecule by molecule. I felt my mind expanding, my perception stretching out to encompass realms beyond the veil of reality. But at what cost? My vision began to blur and distort, colors bleeding into one another like watercolors in the rain. I stumbled backwards, gasping for breath as the room around me seemed to dissolve into chaos. The candles on the altar flared and spat, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Malister's voice whispered in my ear, its words dripping with malevolence. As I continued to investigate, I found myself descending into madness, questioning my own sanity. The dark crystal pulsed with an energy that seemed to sear itself into my mind, filling me with a sense of unease and foreboding. Every step I took, every decision I made, seemed to lead me further down the path of destruction. I began to see visions of ancient rituals, forbidden knowledge, and unspeakable horrors lurking in the shadows. The lines between reality and madness blurred, and I found myself questioning my own identity. Who was I really? What had I become? The answers, like the crystal's power, seemed to shift and writhe before me, always just out of reach. My mind reeled with the implications of what I had discovered. Was I still in control, or was I merely a puppet under the Shadow Weaver's strings? I felt myself spiraling downward, down a rabbit hole of madness and despair. The candles on the altar seemed to mock me, their flames dancing with an otherworldly glee. Malister's voice whispered in my ear, its words dripping with malevolence. "You should have left it alone," it hissed. "Now you'll never be free." I stumbled through the ritual chamber, my heart racing with fear and uncertainty. The air was thick with the scent of decay and corruption, and I knew that I was running out of time. If I didn't find a way to escape the Shadow Weaver's grasp, I would be consumed by its power forever. The day of the ritual arrived, and I prepared myself for what was to come. The air was heavy with anticipation, thick with the scent of incense and something else, something darker. Malister's eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light as he led me through the final preparations. We gathered in the heart of the ritual chamber, surrounded by candles that seemed to burn with an inner fire. The dark crystal pulsed on the altar, its power coursing through every molecule of air. I felt a shiver run down my spine as Malister's voice rose to a crescendo. "The time of reckoning is upon us," he declared, his words echoing off the walls. "Today, we make contact with the Shadow Weaver." The room fell silent, the only sound the soft crackle of the candles. I felt a presence stir, a darkness that seemed to coalesce into a palpable force. It was as if the very fabric of reality was torn apart, revealing a realm beyond our own. Malister raised his hands, and the air began to shimmer with an otherworldly energy. "The veil between worlds is at its thinnest," he intoned, his voice dripping with anticipation. "Now we make contact." The moment the words left his lips, the room erupted into chaos. Candles flared and spat, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air seemed to writhe and twist, like a living thing. I felt myself lifted out of my body, suspended in midair as the ritual reached its climax. During the ritual, I felt the entity's presence growing stronger, and I knew I had to confront it head-on. The air was electric with anticipation as Malister's voice rose to a crescendo, his words weaving a spell of summoning and binding. "The time of reckoning is upon us," he declared, his eyes blazing with an otherworldly intensity. "You have called, mortal. Now you must face what lies beyond." The room seemed to shrink, the candles burning brighter as if fueled by an inner fire. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing with fear and anticipation. And then it happened. A presence coalesced before me, its form shifting and flowing like a living thing. Eyes burned with an otherworldly intensity, piercing through the veil of reality. The entity spoke, its voice a low, thrumming vibration that seemed to shake my very foundations. "You have summoned me," it declared, its words echoing in my mind. "Now you must face the consequences." I felt myself tremble with fear, yet I knew I had to stand tall to confront this unknown entity head-on. Malister's hand closed around mine, his grip like a vice. "Together, we will bind this thing," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. But as I looked into the entity's eyes, I knew that was a lie. This was something far greater than any binding spell could contain. This was the unknown, the unnameable, and it would not be contained. I faced the unknown and confronted the terror that lurked within. The entity's eyes seemed to bore into my soul, its gaze a cold, calculating weight that pressed upon my very being. I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller and more insignificant in the face of this unspeakable horror. And yet, I stood tall, frozen in place as the entity began to speak. Its voice was like a rusty gate scraping against concrete, a sound that seemed to shred the very fabric of reality. "You should not have come here," it hissed, its words dripping with malevolence. "This is my domain, and you are but a mere insect." I tried to speak, to defend myself, but my voice was trapped in my throat like a bird unable to escape its cage. The entity took a step closer, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable horror. I felt my heart racing, my breath coming in short gasps as I struggled to maintain some semblance of sanity. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with a dull ache. The ritual chamber was silent, the candles extinguished, and Mallister stood over me, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "What happened?" he asked, his voice soft and gentle. But I knew that something had changed within me. Something fundamental had shifted, and I could feel it lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to emerge. I stood up, my legs shaking beneath me. The ritual chamber was in shambles, candles extinguished, and the air thick with the scent of smoke. Mallister stood before me, a mixture of concern and curiosity etched on his face. But I knew that something was wrong. Something fundamental had shifted within me. My mind reeled as I tried to piece together what had happened during the ritual. The entity's presence still lingered in my mind, its malevolent gaze seared into my brain. I felt like I was trapped in a living nightmare, unable to wake up from the terror that haunted me. Mallister approached me, his eyes locked on mine. "You have been changed," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The ritual has awakened something within you." He paused, studying me intently. "Something ancient and terrible." I knew then that my life would never be the same. The horrors I had unleashed during the ritual still lurked in the shadows of my mind, waiting to pounce. My grip on reality was tenuous at best, and I knew that I would never be able to shake off the feeling of dread that settled over me like a shroud. The world around me seemed to darken, as if it too were reflecting the horror that had taken hold of my soul. I stumbled backwards, away from Mallister's watchful eyes. "I have to get out of here," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I have to escape." But as I turned to flee, I realized that I was not alone. The entity stood behind me, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable horror. Its eyes locked on mine, and I knew then that my final confrontation had begun.